and welcome to Early Years TV with me, Kathy Brodie. Today is all about playful interactions and therapeutic engagement with children, and I'm just delighted to be joined again by Sean Bryant. Sean is a nationally recognised professional development facilitator. He brings 30 years of experience, expertise, and commitment to advancing the work of adults involved in the lives of young children. He's a contributing author of the book Trauma Responsive Family Engagement in Early Childhood Practices for Equity and Resilience, and author of the amazing book Trauma Informed Practices for Early Childhood Educators, which of course is now in its second edition, and a facilitator at the ECE Coaching Institute. Sean is a director and principal consultant with Yes to ECE, an early childhood training, coaching and consultancy business. And on top of all that, Sean is also the Director of Professional Development for the Child Scales at Yale University Child Study Centre, where he coordinates and leads national trainings related to the Child Tool for early childhood mental health consultants, coaches, assessors, researchers across all disciplines. And you will find that in the back catalogue of Early Years TV now. That's already there. A very warm welcome to Early Years TV, Sean Bryant.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm so excited to be back. It just feels like chatting with an old friend.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased you found time, because I know we were just talking before. You've been with the children, you've been doing other training, you've been all over the place doing things. So I thank you so much for finding time to come and talk to us today. I really, really do appreciate it. And last time we spoke about the child scales, and we'll probably touch on those again today. But today we want to discuss playful interactions, because I came across a fabulous quote of yours. And let me get this right. It is, one need not be a therapist to be therapeutic. So, right, wherever you want to start on that.
Let's start by this. So I do use that quote a great deal, but I heard that quote. So it's not my quote directly. I heard it from the director of the Georgetown Early Childhood Mental Health. He made this statement at a conference I had attended years ago, and it sat with me. I was an early childhood mental health consultant at the time in San Francisco, in California, in the United States. So I want to say that was probably almost 20 years ago. And I've just used it because it's so relevant to my work. So it's not my direct quote, even though I quote it a lot and use it in almost every presentation. It's actually Dr. Neil Horn is his name. Dr. Neil Horn is but I'm not sure it's his quote. He may have heard someone else state it also. So
it is great. Yeah.
Yeah. But it resonates so much for me in terms of early childhood and what we're asking adults involved in the lives of young children to actually understand, know, and do. This notion of, I'm going to go back 25 years ago when I was a mental health consultant, and the teachers in the centers, they would wait for me to show up, because it was almost as if they thought, well, he's the mental health consultant. He has some fairy dust that he can sprinkle to make things change. And I remember having a conversation with a very skilled teacher at the time, and she had been teaching for years. And it felt so fanciful around her waiting for me to show up, and what that meant and what it felt like for me. And, this is 25 years ago. So mental health, in terms of it being a process kind of professional development, has changed in what we understand. Back then, they were waiting for the mental health consultant to show up. And this teacher, I remember it vividly. She said, "Oh, Sean, you're here. Great. We've been waiting for you. We heard we had a new consultant and you were coming." She took me to the classroom door and she said, "We cleaned out the broom closet across the hall so that you can work with Jose Miguel, Michael." She pointed to the children, because to them, the mental health consultant was respite. I was coming to take away the children for 30 minutes or 45 minutes who were problems or problematic. In that, even though I was only there for a short time, they look forward to that kind of release. Now, we do know now that mental health consultation has fundamentally shifted. It's about resourcing the teacher so that if we show up for that hour, those 2 hours, it's really about you building your own internal resource And some of that is attunement and playful interactions to get through the rest of the week. Not just getting through it like, oh, I made it, but to really understand oneself better. So it's about going inside to then show up differently on the outside around what real consultation is. And attunement is a part of that. So much of this playful interaction piece in attuned interactions, for me, it stems from, 27 years ago, being a mental health consultant who, there is no degree in mental health consultation. We're all trained differently. You can be trained as a counselor. You can be trained as a psychologist, as a marriage and family therapist, as a psychiatrist, as a social worker, or even in some states as an early childhood master's level educator and provide consultation. So you have folk from a variety of disciplines showing up to offer this thing called mental health consultation, where you're showing up to help adults to support who they deem to be children who are in need. So that's the basis of it for me, around grabbing that quote, Kathy, and it being a core of what I do. And for over 20 years, it's just been resonating with me around how do I kind of land and position myself to help others understand what a therapeutic milieu is, and that we all can embody it, and that one need not be a therapist to be therapeutic, that we all, can show up and demonstrate and hone and increase our therapeutic interactions with ourselves. That's that internal piece, with other adults, and with definitely young children. And as a mental health consultant, a huge part of my work for me was creating what we call the parallel process, that I would show up in hope to provide for that teacher or that director, that leader, that coach, what it was I hope that they could give to another adult or another child. So that parallel process I'm offering up to them in terms of playful interactions, attuned interactions, what it feels like, what it sounds like, and how I engage with them, so that they can then go back and give it to a young child.
Yeah. That makes total sense in terms of sustainability, in terms of the good use of your time, good use of their time. And I can see how that would then sort of blossom and flourish, rather than just sitting waiting till somebody comes and sits in the broom cupboard and solves the problem for them, which sounds horrific now, but obviously at the time that's what's happened. So for me, I've got a certain idea in my mind what a playful interaction would look like. How would you describe a playful interaction?
I think in short, a short version would be that the adult understands, that teacher, that early childhood carer, that professional, that parent, that aide understands that this notion of playful interactions, that it's about them being a guide or a facilitator, that they're part and parcel of what children kind of bring up, that there's intention to it. It's just not all, we're hoping that this happens, we're waiting for children to say and do these things, but that all interactions have this playful core to them. And if we're prepared, we can guide the children. It's almost like a pivot back and forth. The children show up and offer up something, then the adult responds. The children show up and offer something, the adult responds. So we end up creating this rhythm, that playful interactions creates this rhythm. It actually happened today. So you talked about, Kathy, like some of the things that I do, but I actually have a large third role now. So I'm still the director and principal consultant with Yes to ECE, my consultancy, where I'm training, coaching, and consulting across the country. I'm still the director of professional development and adult learning at the Child Lab. But as I was coaching and training lots of teachers and leaders, I kept getting something that felt new to me over 3 decades. And it was this: children are different. Children are different. And I kept thinking, what is everyone talking about? And they were like, no, the children are just showing up so different. More and more children are showing up on the autism spectrum. They're getting diagnosed. More and more children are having sensory needs and developmental delays. So, I feel like
Mhm.
I'm not an elder yet, but I'm there, Kathy. I said,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take a chance and go back into the classroom. So my third role is I'm the pedagogical lead at a preschool. I actually have a classroom that I spend time in, and I was there this morning for a few hours before coming home to, I talked to you earlier about I had a 2 hour training, and before I'm talking to you, but this morning there was a playful interaction. So, here in the States, we're coming off of a holiday. And over the weekend, I guess it was raining and the wind blew, and one of the branches on the tree in the yard had fallen um, on the slide structure. So, and it's the slide that goes around. So the children were saying, "Oh no, it's a tree." So I stepped back there to see what's happening, and I realized, oh, it broke, and that I can move it. Because at first I thought someone else was going to have to come and cut
Mm.
it. And when I started shaking, I was like, I was able to pick it up and place it somewhere so that other people can come do what they needed to do. And then I noticed the slide was dirty. There were like things from the tree that have fallen. There was like animals who, I had to clean the slide. So I asked Bryce, I said, Bryce, help me clean the slide. Get the soap and the scrubber and I'll get the hose. And he's following, he's helping me. We're doing this thing together, and he's spraying and I'm wetting it and I'm scrubbing. And then he notices that the slide's all clean, but it's wet. So this is indicative of a playful interaction. He goes to the top of the slide, and I said, "Wait a minute! You still have the scrubber and the soap in your hand. Go put it back to where it belongs." So he puts it back, and I'm still like spraying because I see some stuff on the side. So I'm
Mm.
just kind of wetting the slide so that I can get all the dust and the dirt off of it from the tree. But he comes back really quick, and he's at the top of the slide, and he says, "Water slide!" And
Ah,
he just slid down the slide. Now I was thinking, wow, I'm wetting the slide, but in my 50-year-old brain, I'm not thinking water slide. We have fun in the water because it's been really hot, but I didn't think
yeah,
water slide.
yeah.
So us cleaning together turned into this playful interaction that he
Oh,
created along with me, because my response wasn't, "Oh no,
yeah, yeah,
we only have 15 more minutes and then it's lunchtime." It was none of that. Now I knew, well, you won't have a long time, but that meant I had to keep letting water from the hose go down the slide. But I looked up, Kathy, and guess what? There were 10 children going
oh.
down the slide. I never had to. This is what a real playful interaction to me is. I never had to say,
Yeah,
be patient, one at a time, wait your turn,
yeah,
all of those
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
instructions. I realized none of that came out of my mouth, because what I was doing was giggling with them. It was this playful interaction that started with cleaning the slide, that turned into this organic. We had the water on the slide. You're holding it because you're tall enough as the adult to go to the top, and the water's just going down. We can all sit
yeah.
down and have this great time in this hot weather. So to me, as a guide or facilitator, responding in kind to what happens for children. I can give you another example.
Yeah.
This same group of children, we haven't really taught like A, B, C. We what we do kind of lean into is the sounds that letters make.
Ah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we the children, and it's a sing-songy way, and the children playful interaction after they had mastered kind of apple, apple, baby, baby, buh, buh. Then we started with movements, baby, baby, buh, buh,
Oh,
buh. But this was the children creating
yeah.
interactions for the sounds. So, me and the other adults were like, okay, we better catch up, because they had their own mindset around the sounds and the words that we're saying and the movements that they brought to the interaction that could have been very didactic, very adult
Yeah,
driven,
yeah, yeah.
but it became child and centered and playful, because then the children started attributing, and this is that learning that happens in this playful way, that apple, apple, ah. Then they started saying Asher, Asher, ah,
Uh-huh.
ah. And I remember the day, because Nova said, Asher, get in the middle, get in the middle. And he stood up in the middle and was dancing.
Oh,
Everyone was saying his name.
yeah,
So I can imagine teachers saying, wait a minute, no, sit back down. That's
yeah.
not what we're doing. But for
Mm-mm.
me, as a guide and facilitator, the playful interaction says they understand what's happening and they're adding to it on their own. So I'm going to playfully, as the guide, lean into it. They literally were telling me we understand the sounds and we know
Yeah,
the sounds that are
yeah,
attributed to each one of the children here's names. And when their names come, we want that kid to stand up and dance. We're all going to giggle. So something that traditionally would be seen as very academic, the sounds that
yeah,
letters
yeah,
make. Here, it's always been a playful interaction with sounds and beats that really has this learning embedded into it that to the naked eye or the naked ear, they can completely miss. Oh, there's deep
yeah.
learning happening here in a very playful way. And I think when you talk about playful interactions, what I hear is something I often share with groups that I'm training around this question of neglect. That if it's a play-based program, and then we talk about neglect, I'm now saying to adults who work with young children, if you're outside in the outdoors or in the inside, and you say, "Oh, it's a play-based setting," but you're standing there like this, I'm now
Ah,
saying, I wonder if that's neglectful. And it's the opposite of a playful
oh,
interaction with you as facilitator or guide. Can we have that conversation that your arms folded or you're standing away saying, well, it's a play-based setting as if children are supposed to just do it all on their own. And if that's true, then we don't need to be here. So I think the other part, if there's two sides to the playful interaction coin, I say there's a third side, the circumference of the coin that we often don't talk about. And that's where I talk about neglect in terms of playful interactions being our role and responsibility to ensure that as a guide or facilitator, those interactions are playful. And I just gave you two examples. And, as my
yeah,
godmother has said, you're back in the classroom, so you're going to get all of these current stories. And there are
yeah,
tons and tons around just being with those children in time and space that they've been able to turn because I am the teacher, but I have other roles. There are times when I'm not there. I usually tell them, Mr. Sean's going to get on the plane and I'm going to this place and I'm going to be with teachers and then I'm going to come back. And the times that I walk into the room and they turn around and see me and all of them get up and run to me and call my name and knock me down on the ground, that I see that as this playful interaction that is still learning because I'm then saying, oh, you all miss me. I miss you too. All of these hugs. I've seen children walk away and turn back and say, I want another hug. Like this playful interaction around, to me, it's relationship.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
deep relationship where children are saying through a hug to me what they're feeling on the inside. And it's my role, if I'm attuned to what's really happening, to give them language for that, to give them language for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So that I was just going to pick up on that actually. The attunement there, that's a really nice description of attunement in practice, isn't it? Those interactions and interaction is always a two-way thing, isn't it? But I do think in both of your examples there that the adults have reacted to the children. They haven't just gone, actually, we've got an agenda, we've got a curriculum we need to follow here. They have actually listened to the children and turned their thinking around as a result of the children, which for me is what attunement is all about.
Definitely, definitely. There's a few things that come up for me around attuned interactions in early childhood spaces, because I think the adult has to be attuned to the other adults, something that I think
Oh,
you don't talk about enough in this work.
yeah,
Um, and I have to be attuned to multiple children. So
yeah,
it requires a lot of me, and I don't think we honor that, like what that really requires for an adult to be that present. And I like Dan Siegel's 4 S's, that each one of those children in that class, including Sean, you know, and including Alexis, the other adult, we all have to experience safety. Alexis needs to experience safety as the other adult. She needs
yeah,
to anticipate what I'm going to do, not be always caught off guard. It has to be predictable, not just for the children, but for her, because then we create the climate of safety for all of them, that they feel like they belong, in that it's not our classroom, it's their classroom. In that there's this ownership, in this anchoring at the core of, we feel safe here, we belong, we can explore, manipulate, discover, and investigate. Or we can sometimes, which is what they do, walk over to me. And I actually had a little boy, I see her, he was in the block area, and sometimes I'm doing overview. I'm a Montessorian, even though it's not a Montessori program. So that kind of, I need to see what's happening. And there's some monitoring and circulating. And he popped his head up from the block area and he said, "Mr. Sean." And I said, "Yes, I see her." He says, "Are you all right?" And I said, "I'm wonderful. I'm just watching everybody to make sure everybody's safe and having a good time." And he said, "Okay." And he went back down. And I realized when he went back down that he was down, but because most of my shelves in my room, you can see through them. So there's no back to the shelf. So when he bends down, he could peek through and see me. So he stood up because he saw me doing like this. He popped his head up. Safety. So I couldn't just simply say, "I'm fine." I said, I explained what I was doing, because him popping his head up was, wait a minute, what's happening here? Is something going on that I need to know about? And, children who have anxiety, or their safety has been kind of ruptured in terms of life circumstances, they're constantly looking for that safety to be reinstated over and over again. So that's huge to attuned interactions. And then this notion that they all experience being seen, not seen in like a clownish way, but seen authentically around who they are. So I have a little kid in my class on the spectrum, and he receives a lot of support. Like, he has a special instructor that comes, a speech therapist that comes, an occupational therapist that comes. There's a lot of folk that come, and then he has what we call a one-on-one support, where this person is there with him the entire time to help him, so that I don't have to say, "Come back to circle, we're at circle." The other person is supporting with those things. And he was cutting a shape out of paper, and I didn't think he could do it. I really didn't think he could. I was like, I don't think he has the fine motor capacity. And when I say he persevered, like, he stopped and he took a break, he giggled with the kid beside him, and he came back, and when he finished, it was like that friendly reminder to me, like, "Sean, he gave up too quick. Look what he did." So I think I was so excited. He kept looking at me like, "You're really excited." I gave him a high five. I commented on like what he did. He really felt seen. And I realized he felt seen because it was an hour later he mentioned it. So this notion of attuned interactions not just help children feel safe, but they feel seen in the context of being an individual amongst the community. Very, very important for us to understand. We've got to pivot and see who children are. Because the other kid at the table, he tried, but the way he was holding the scissors, it was like, he's never going to cut that way. And this is a kid who oftentimes, another kid on the spectrum, clearly articulated. He said, "Mr. Sean, will you cut this for me?" And I remember standing there like, he just said a complete sentence. Like, and it's going through my head quickly, but it was like, that was a good. And he said it again, "Mr. Sean, will you cut this for me?" And I said, "I will. I'm going to come help you." And I stood behind him, and we kind of did it together. And then he colored it and did everything he wanted to do with it. But it was this notion of being seen.
Yeah.
That was a struggle for him. And the other side of it was what he articulated with clear language, something he oftentimes won't do. So this is how we see children as individuals when we are attuned, in that if I'm using this attunement the way Dan Siegel envisions it, all children and adults need to experience safety. We need to experience feeling seen authentically about who we are and what we bring around strengths and areas of growth. But then there needs to be this soothing around, I replace soothing with the flow of how I move through time and
Uh-huh.
space. That's that soothing.
Yeah.
So my response to both of those children, well, all three of them, because I gave another one, created this notion of you. I feel safe. You saw me, but now I can go back and have this flow in the classroom because the first two have been met. So the other part for children is soothing is I can really start the learning process
Yeah. Yeah.
in this playful way. And the first three need to be present for the fourth to show up. This notion of they now feel anchored and secured in their belonging in our classroom community. So I think that's a broad way of saying it. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett says it a little bit differently. I'm reading a lot of her right now. Um, one of the ongoing jokes that people who know me always know that I've said for years is for some reason, I always learn what the men have said in early childhood first. And then I learn what the women have said. And each time I learn what the women have said, it's like, wait a minute, this is a little bit better. I'm not sure. I don't know why, Kathy, but it always happens that way. And they kind of turn things on their heads a little bit around, well, he wasn't right, and here's why, and here's all the research. So I'm devouring everything that she's written. And she's had a few books. I have three of them. Her YouTube's just devouring her. But one of the things that she said that really stayed with me is this notion of the best thing for our nervous systems is another human being. So we talk about attuned interactions. The best thing for our nervous system is another human being. Then she adds, Kathy, and the worst thing for our nervous system is another human being. So I have some choices to make as the adult there. That's what she's saying. I have to be conscious and attuned around, am I going to be something that's helpful and, educative to their nervous system, or I'm going to show up and be unaware in something that's harmful to their nervous systems. Just powerful. I was like, whoa, for me, she turned things over in this other way. And then she goes into all this stuff about feelings and emotions that I won't get into right now, and around some of what we learn and believe and some of what I've espoused. And she was like, well, this is where that came from. And I'm like, ugh, I have presentations that are recorded online where I'm saying this thing. And then she's like, nope, here's that came to be.
But that's good. I mean, that showing growth, I think, as a human, I think is really good to show growth. You don't sort of come out knowing everything, and nor yet should you. You should grow and understand. And the world's certainly the last 5 years or so, the world's been turned on its head, hasn't it? So you should grow. But I think it's having that self-awareness, having that knowledge of what you don't know, or how you see the world, and we're not going to get into it today, but things like unconscious bias and all that sort of thing as well, that all comes into it, doesn't it? So I mean, and you've spoken about adults, so let's just think for a moment about the adults. How can we improve our own self-awareness of our playful interactions, of our attunement? Because I'm going to say now that I've worked in settings where we've had educators stood in the doorway, arms crossed, because they don't do outside. So I have seen this in real life. It's like, okay, but they've got no self-awareness that was in fact a very strange thing to be doing with young children. So how can we improve our self-awareness?
Well, I think self-awareness for me, Kathy, it's tied to attuned interactions. So I think some of these conditions create space for the other to exist. So I'm going to respond to that question by going back to attuned interactions and then moving there. So this other piece around attuned interactions are adults working to get in sync with young children. So the research tells us that we're only in sync with children 20 to 30% of the time, meaning teachers, caregivers, parents, you have only been perfectly in sync with your sons 20 to 30% of the time. Most parents hear that and say, wait a minute, I've given life and limb for these kids. There's no way. But here's the other thing. That means everything was working well. You didn't have to come back and correct, have a conversation. 20% of the time, we're in sync that way, meaning we're perfectly attuned. 70 to 80% of the time, we're making that choice as an adult, as a teacher, as a parent, to work to get back in sync. Some of us say, I said it, I'm not putting in any work. So they don't do the work of getting back in sync. They leave children on their own. But the rest of us, when we're conscious of it, that attuned interaction says, I'm constantly working to get back in sync with each child, with each adult. And that's most of the time. That's the work. That's the work. And when we do that, at the heart of that is wellness, Kathy. Wellness. Wellness. It goes back to that initial statement I made. What I want children to have, I must first offer it to what? Myself, and I must practice it. This is the beginning of attuned interactions. So there's this other saying around, it's important to be self-full. Being self-full is not being selfish. It's how we become therapeutic. Wow. So how do I say this? So to become self-full, so there's this book called A Course in Miracles. And in the Course in Miracles, it talks about basically, having a glass and pouring into the glass. In that, particularly, we know females do this, mothers do it, those in the helping professions, their glass is never full. So they struggle to become self-full, i.e. therapeutic, because they're always working from a half-full glass, because they believe that they have to start pouring out of their glass to others, and their glass is never full. So the strategy here on the path to that next piece of awareness is to accept and stand in that Kathy can pour into her glass until it becomes full to the top. And that as she continues to pour and becoming self-full, what comes out of the cup, the overflow, is what she then can give away. This is how we center ourselves in becoming more therapeutic in the work and more attuned. It's harder to become attuned when I'm working constantly from what? A not full threshold. But so many of us have heard, and the messaging has been, it is okay. It's what's been modeled for many people from their own parents, that they work through it, they get around it. But this notion of, wait a minute, I can pour into my glass to become full and I'm not selfish, is the beginning of it. And it's that bridge for me between attunement and this notion of self-awareness, right? I think when we do that, we start to bridge and see stress differently. Most people, there's this saying that says stress is contagious, but so is calmness. So if I'm always pulling from a half-filled cup, I'm probably more stressful than I like to acknowledge. But if my cup is full, I'm probably connecting to calm a lot easier, right? So if I'm connecting to calm a lot easier, I'm building in this notion of like just therapeutic ways of, or strategies. Like I'm probably moving and walking and dancing. I may be connected to my breathing. I may be something that I love, talk therapy. When I'm working with teachers and parents, I often say, if it's something difficult you have to talk about, get up and walk and talk about it. Don't sit down, because it's going to integrate into our bodies differently. Using art and music or journaling, or what we call slow activities, slowing down, maybe making some tea and just sipping some tea and going through your thoughts for 10 minutes, not an hour, just 10 minutes. Because these coping strategies are those therapeutic ways that defend us against coping mechanisms like screen time or creating to-do list. When I mentor people, I always say, I want you to create an accomplishment list. Put it somewhere where you can see it. And each time you make an accomplishment, no matter how small, write it down. Some of them will say, I got it in my car. It's on my sticky note. And I write something down every day. And this notion of to-do lists, for many people who are stressed, it becomes a coping mechanism because they keep adding to the to-do list, or things like alcohol, or folk who always are seeking information, but they do nothing with it. All of these are coping mechanisms that many early childhood teachers and families kind of deal with. And then we can get into like the language of the brain and how the brain communicates, like the language of the brainstem is sensations, the language of the limbic system is feelings and emotions, and the language of the prefrontal cortex is words and things that adults can do with children or by themselves to settle themselves when they're there. All of this brings us to what you're asking me, self-awareness. How do I begin to recognize and understand my emotions, my thoughts, what I value and hold in high esteem, and how that influences me and others, right? While I acknowledge my strengths and core capacities and my remaining areas of growth, right? So for me, self-awareness is always asking myself these open-ended questions, that I'm literally going to share some of them that I ask myself. And sometimes I laugh because I'm like, why don't I have an immediate answer to that? Why did it take me a long time to think about what the real response was? And it's because it's not what was modeled for most of us. So I may ask myself, what emotions did I feel strongly today? I'm thinking, I do this for a living. I should be able to say, it was this, it was this. I usually have to sit with that and say, wait a minute, uh-oh. Or another one is, how might I describe my vision for the future over the next 6 months? How might I describe my vision for the future over the next 6 days? All of that self-awareness. Because if I can't answer that, that means I'm lacking in awareness. And these are areas I need to build upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that when we looked at this question and I thought self-awareness, I'm very, very interested in this area because I often think that you're absolutely right. As early childhood educators, as professionals, we are asked to do more and more for less and less, and our cups are getting emptier and emptier, I feel. But there are ways of filling it. But I think that self-awareness is often used as almost what are we lacking, where we can be self-aware because we've got to be better at, we've got to do more of, we've got to create more. I love the idea of having an accomplishment list. I just think that's amazing, but again, that's still very prefrontal cortex, isn't it? Checking in with your own emotions is so important, and be able to just say to yourself, do you know what? I've had a really stressful day today, or it's been very challenging for me today, but hey, do you know what? I've actually done very well. I've actually managed to cheer somebody else up. I took a few minutes in the staff room, so I've managed to just calm myself down and went back to it, or whatever it is that you've done for yourself today. But recognizing that, I think, takes quite a lot of practice, doesn't it? And what sort of strategies would you say that you need to have in place to be able to do that?
I'm going to give you one that I actually use with teachers and parents. So for them to become self-aware about their oftentimes core strengths and core capacities, because, most adults focus on, like you just said, what do I have to do opposed to what, so the negative piece for some reason is just with we actually know why. It's the bottom of the brain. So, when that brainstem is activated by what do I have left to do, or a fear, so that takes over. That's where stress lives. And then that becomes all we think about, even though we may have some prefrontal core strengths and capacities. So what I often do is I'll say, I need everybody to get something to write with and something to write on. If you don't have anything, just open your phone to the notes on your phone. Even though I want you to write it, if you don't have any, and I usually give them something to write with, I say, but feel free to put it on your phone if you want to. I usually pay attention to the ages of the people, and that usually makes a difference, Then I tell them, I say, I want you to think of something. So if it's a room full of parents, I'll say, as a parent, if you had to stand up right now and then teach every other parent in this room something, what is that one thing that you could teach us all without thinking, without needing a slide deck, without preparing? You are that effective at it. Take 5 minutes and write it down, but think about that thing, and then I want you to share it. I do the same thing with teachers. If I needed you to stand up and teach all of us one other thing, whatever it is as a teacher, what is it that you could stand up in 5 minutes and teach us all with no preparation? We all have it, Kathy. But most of the time, we're not calling it to the awareness. So that simple activity is designed for them to think about it. And literally, the last time I did it, the first parent stood up and she was smiling. She stood up and she said, I play with my son really well. She said, I can teach all of y'all how to play with a 4-year-old little boy. And she kept talking about it. And she was so proud of herself. She said, I had to lean into this. The way he wanted to play, what was playful to him. He didn't want to sit down and be still. As she kept talking about it, she says, I became really great at it. The next parent stood up and said, I can teach all of you how to be organized. She says, I use a Google Calendar like I was born into it. I can teach you all how to be very organized. So they all kept popping up. And then I said, how was that for you all? And they all said, I had to think really hard about it. I kept thinking about what did I have to do? And that's what's set up. So this self-awareness is, how do we engage ourselves in these things that exist in our lives, but we're oftentimes moving as teachers, as parents, as ECE professionals, where we can't slow down to usher those things into the awareness so that we use them as strengths and as a place to stand on.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting that you did that as a group activity as well, because very often, certainly in settings, and I'm thinking as well, of course, childminders, teachers tend to be, they may be with an assistant in, or maybe a couple of assistants in the classroom. Nurseries, you tend to be maybe 1, 2, possibly 3 in a room. Childminders are by themselves. So very, very often, early childhood professionals are, even though they're working as part of a team, they're actually working sort of within little pockets within that team. I love the idea of being able to support your staff, whether that's just somebody else in the baby room or, a fellow childminder, that you can support other people emotionally like that. And that's such a great thing to be able to do, isn't it?
Also, because what the other piece that happens is Kathy shares, and I'm like, oh, Kathy says she's very organized. I didn't know that. I'm going to ask her for a tip on how I can get organized, because it's this thing I'm struggling with. So we end up voicing our strengths to people. And in conversations, I may say, I've had 20,000 conversations with Kathy, and I didn't know that about her, because what usually leads the way is what we have to do, or what we're struggling with. What we have to do and what we're struggling with. So it's really, Kathy, I think it's the entry point into a new way of communicating for those people who become really self-aware, that the self-awareness says, I can now communicate differently with people upon my entry. Instead of leading with, I got 2 more projects I need to do, I lead with, wow, I had this great experience today.
Yeah. And that's got to change the emotional sort of the emotional environment, if you like, of any setting, hasn't it? And we're talking there now, if the adults can change that emotional environment and keep it very positive, and that gives you a really nice upward virtual cycle, doesn't it? And that, of course, is going to affect the children. The children are going to pick up on that instantly, aren't they?
They are. And hopefully I've picked up on it if I'm attuned to myself, that I've picked up on what changes are happening for me, or what I like to call activations. Like, if we I'm gonna use the word dysregulation, and some people think the goal is to always be in a state of regulation. No, I have a huge toolbox of things that I pull on when I become dysregulated. I'm on Zooms a lot. Sometimes I hear things that are really unsettling. And when they're unsettled, I typically hold my stress in my neck and my shoulders. But what I do is I keep lotion on my desk, Kathy. So when I hear those things, I do like this. I'm listening and I'm rubbing lotion on my hands, and I begin to feel what? Better. Or I keep warm water on my desk, and I drink the water, and warm water activates my vagus nerve and it calms me down. But I'm attuned and aware of what's happening in me. So the other part that's happening for parents and adults and teachers is this internal awareness that has to grow. I didn't always have this internal awareness in me. I did not. But as I've built my toolbox, I can pull on those resources when needed and necessary to connect me back to calmness and away from the stress.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then I can, so I mean, the obvious next step from that is, and I can see how having that calmness in yourself and that self-awareness, then to use our analogy, overspills that cup, which you can then share with others. And you can then share whether that's with your setting, with your children, with your family, extended family, or whether you're just out at the shops. I mean, that all then overspills to everybody else, is it? That therapeutic kind of feeling.
Definitely, because for most people, it becomes a way of life. It's not
Yeah.
this, I use this thing between 9 a.m. and 9:30. It becomes a way of seeing and understanding and being. And when that happens, that's that change that it spills out because it's a part of who you are and who you're becoming, as this constant in for me, it's not like it's fixed and it's like, oh, I'm there. It's this continual learning process. It's ongoing. And for me, it never stops. It never
Yeah.
stops.
No, absolutely. And of course, that leads us on nicely to, yes, you never stop as well, Sean. I'm always amazed. I mean, books and everything that you're doing, and as well being back in with the children, which I'm so pleased for on the children's behalf. I think that's amazing. I think that's fabulous for the children. But what other things are you up to at the moment? What sort of thing, where can we see you, and what sort of things are you doing at the minute, Sean?
Well, what's about to happen over the summer months are a number of free trainings. One is Tender and Tough Topics, where lots of topics that early childhood professionals feel some contention or reservation about. Just a slew of those are being offered at no cost. And then towards the end of the summer, some low cost ones around things like the first 45 days of school, and some things to ground classrooms around the research that says if a teacher does these things in the first 45 days and they're consistent, regardless of the group, they'll see some changes. Here, schools typically starts in September, and in the southern states, it'll start the end of August. But if those first 45 days, so we're talking about a month and a half, if we ground ourselves, what needs to happen? Some things around adults collaborating and what that means, and how children are looking and learning from us in this silent way that we're oftentimes unaware of.
Mm-hmm.
Those topics of grief and homelessness and trauma, and what they mean, not just for young children, but the adults in their lives, and how we need to engage differently. Autism strategies that are practical for adults who are saying, okay, I may not be able to keep up with the research, but every year there are more and more children in my classroom who are on the spectrum.
Yes.
And what am I supposed to do? What does it mean? So offering those to people who do the work is a lot of what's coming up, in terms of my consultancy, the work with Yale at the Child Lab, where we're updating a few things around particularly socio-emotional learning, and bringing those things to the forefront around continuing to support educators who work with vulnerable young children and their families. So just excited about what's coming. And it's a slow process for me, Kathy, but writing and writing and writing. I thought I was going to be much quicker, but I'm realizing it's a slow process for myself.
Well, but that usually shows it's a thorough process as well. So that's always good. Yeah. And your writing is absolutely amazing. So yeah, just at whatever speed you want, that's absolutely fine. And I will make sure that all the links are in the words that go along with the video, so people can click through whenever they're watching this, whether it's later on in the summer but the first 45 days in the classroom, that sounds very, very interesting. Wow. And of course, low cost and free training. So thank you very much indeed for that. Really appreciate it. And I will make sure that the links to your books, of course, are in the words that go along with the video. But wow, Sean, I just love chatting with you. And I'm always a little bit sad when we come to the end, because there's always so much more I want to talk about.
Right.
But thank you so much for taking time out today and talking to us all about therapeutic and playful interactions and attunement and everything else today. Thank you so much, Sean Bryant.
Thank you. Take good care.
And you. And I look forward to welcoming everybody to the next session on Early Years TV.